Hello, I'm Marco from All Spirit Activism. I'm sorry for my absence. I have gotten married, I have had a full-time job and been busy with Pentecostals and Charismatics for Peace and Justice, among other things, so I haven't had the time to invest in this YouTube channel. But from now and then, I'll try to post a video when I can. Now, I had the privilege to speak to Shane Claiborne, and this video will be a portion of that interview I had with him. Shane was a hero of mine when I was a young Christian. His activism really inspired me, and so I was really curious to hear what he thinks of Donald Trump. See, this weekend in Lynchburg, Shane and Red Letter Christians will organize a revival meeting, and the theme of the revival will be Jesus and Justice. Lynchburg, of course, is the same town where Liberty University is located, the world's biggest Christian and evangelical university, and their president supports Donald Trump. So Shane wanted to organize something that focuses on Jesus instead of Donald Trump, and talks about the Sermon on the Mount and how evangelicals should follow Christ for real. And it was really interesting to hear him talk about the book that he published 10 years ago, Jesus for President. He wrote it together with Chris Hall, and there they talked about how Christians should think about politics, and they put forward these radical ideas, these original Christian ideas that you found in the early church, and that was very critical of political power, and that was non-violent. And it was very interesting to hear Shane reflect on this, because it seems like he has shifted his focus in an age of Trump. While in Jesus for President they were quite sympathetic to the idea not to vote as an act of resistance, today Shane rather emphasizes that Christians should engage in politics in order to keep people like Trump out of the White House. So that was very interesting to hear him talk about, and I'll give you the interview so you can hear him for yourself. Unfortunately, the video quality was not good, so this will be an audio only video, but I hope that you get what he's saying. His English is, after all, better than mine. Thank you for watching. Bless you. See you later. And you obviously have been campaigning for peace and justice issues within the evangelical realm for over a decade. Were you surprised that 80% of white evangelicals supported Trump, or were you sort of expecting that this is where white evangelicalism is right now?
Yeah, I think I was surprised by I mean, 81% is really high. You know, it wouldn't have surprised me to have a majority. But the thing that you said that's so important is what we're talking about are white evangelicals. And, you know, I wrote a piece in the New York Times with Tony, and there's other pieces that we've done. I wrote this chapter of a book called Still Evangelical, kind of like dissecting that a little bit. Because what's so important is as you include other evangelicals than just white evangelicals, that number drops significantly, even some would suggest into a minority of the population, because part of what's happened too is that there's folks that don't want to identify as evangelical because of that. The kind of identity theft or colonizing of evangelicalism that's happened. So there's a lot of folks that are evangelical that they don't want to use the word, you know. So it gets a little dicey. But what I think that showed us very clearly is that there's a generational gap too, overwhelmingly, of young folks and older white evangelicals that are kind of the old guard, you know, the James Dobson, Pat Robertson, Jerry Falwell, almost exclusively older white men that are out there. And you even see that in the lineage of Billy Graham, who just passed, and how his son has postured himself. Franklin Graham, when it comes to politics, I think is really heartbreaking, even to their own family. You know, Jerusha, who's going to be with us in Lynchburg, is the granddaughter of Billy Graham. So yeah, I think we see this real kind of discrepancy there. But I'm encouraged because as you look at young people, they're overwhelmingly young people of faith. And Christian young people, they are against the death penalty. They're concerned about gun violence. They care about immigration, and it's because of their faith. So I think that this stuff's really changing. You can see like the Parkland students down in Florida that are, after this mass shooting that are rising up around our country. I mean, some of the biggest marches we expect on March 24th around gun violence. So I think it's exciting. Years ago, there was an article written that said, it was in the Atlantic, and it said, "How will this generation change Washington when they hate it so much?" So I've been to schools that they said they're political science majors and folks that might go into politics has like just absolutely dropped. And I was talking to him, I said, "What is it?" And he said, "Well, it's because books like Jesus for President," he was half joking, but I would say adamantly these days that to be Christian doesn't mean that we disengage from politics, but that I see policies as one more extension of loving my neighbor as myself means caring about policies that affect them. So, loving my neighbor as myself can be giving out a meal or, inviting someone into my home, but it can also be influencing immigration policies that are causing so many of our young brothers and sisters right now, especially the dreamers, the DACA recipients, to live in such fear for the uncertainty of what their future holds.
Yeah. So do you think there's something that we can learn from Donald Trump?
Well, I think that we can learn from what's happening right now in America. I heard someone say really well, Donald Trump isn't changing America, but he's revealing America. And so all of this dirty residue of racism and white supremacy has been here. And certainly what we can learn from is how to surface that and how to do the hard work that we need to do to heal the wounds of our history. It's kind of like we swept it under a rug and it wasn't going anywhere. So we now, the rug's up. Let's do something about this. That might permanently change our country. So I don't want to give Donald Trump much credit for that.
Yeah.
I think in some ways he just held a mirror up to our country, so we were forced to look at ourselves. But I do think that this is an incredibly significant moment in the history of the United States that where we are going to see some major shifts, where people are rising up like we haven't seen. Even, in the civil rights movement, some of the numbers of folks that are rising up now are even surpassing those numbers. Wow. I think that these are all building on one another. We've got unique tools that we didn't have then. We've got unique challenges too. But anyway, I think it's Donald Trump, I think, also is the it's been said he's kind of the part of the iceberg that you can see, but underneath the water, there's a whole lot more to the iceberg. And I think that's true too, that these are symptoms of a bigger disease. And Donald Trump's going to be, here and gone probably sooner than 4 years,
Yeah.
But this residue of racism and slavery is still with us. So I think we've got to address that and not trivialize this by just reducing it to Donald Trump. I think what we see in white evangelicalism right now, and why we're doing the Lynchburg revival, so many other things, is that there's something that goes much deeper. And part of that is that we've fused together Christianity and American nationalism, in a way that these become almost indistinguishable from each other. So when you have, Robert Jeffress at First Baptist Church in Dallas, they're singing "Make America Great Again" as if it was a hymn in worship. The American flag's bigger than the cross. And what happens is you begin to see the discrepancy between the values of America and the values inherent in the gospel. When you make idols out of fame and wealth and power, Donald Trump is the natural result. When we forget the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor, blessed are the merciful, the meek." I mean, those are the antithesis of the things that we've come to idolize in America. We don't celebrate meekness or the poor or the merciful or the peacemakers. I mean, that would be scandalous. So I think that's where we've got to focus on Jesus again. And a lot of white evangelicalism has lost their grounding in Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. So we got to go back there and say, what if Jesus really meant the stuff he said? And I think we got to preach that, and we got to try to live that. We've got to hold that in contrast, to see how different these gospels are, because the gospel of Trump is very different from the gospel of Jesus, and the lifestyle of Trump is very different from the lifestyle of the gospel, and so something happens when we mix those up. We get confused.